I'm Farooq Ameen. I am an architect and urban designer and a member of the board of directors for a long time. Actually, in January, it's going to be 20 years. I'm very excited to have been associated with the museum for so long.
Hi, my name is Alvin Huang, and I'm the principal of synthesis design and architecture.
So of all the projects that you might have chosen to submit for an award, why did you choose this particular project?
Well, I think there's a few things. I mean, one is that it's something we're quite proud of, and it's a unique project in many aspects, a unique opportunity for us, but it also happens to be about a block and a half away from the A+D Museum. It's literally right down the street on Seton and Fifth.
It's interesting that you kind of draw from different sources for this project, whether it's from the Mayan sources or the African sources and so on. And you've often spoken to me about why this is very important for you. This kind of being able to draw from and to integrate different cultures.
Right.
How much of that was sort of part of how you kind of crafted all of this together?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that I'm very interested in is thinking about architecture as the materialization of value systems, and looking at what's going on in the world today. I think it's really critical for us to kind of remember that our value systems are inherited and they're evolving, but that they are universal as well. And in a project like this one, thinking about how the kind of foundational elements, one of the things that we were looking at was the name Uxmal actually comes from ancient Mayan culture, and it means thrice built. And so this is a project that sits in some ways similar to the ancient Mayan ruin of Uxmal, which was built 3 times over previous ruins, but also was a kind of mystical city of the future that was a vision for the future. And those values were something that we found very intriguing as values to embed into this project, but also as an opportunity to begin thinking about it. This thrice built thing was something where we realized this was a project that was being built on, quote unquote, the ruins of a previous warehouse. We're basically keeping the remains of the warehouse as a shell, building a steel and concrete, reinforced concrete building within it. And then our project is actually within this larger residential hotel project. We're embedding what we're calling building inside a building with this Uxmal arts project. And so that was the kind of thrice built thing. But then when we really started spending more time with Uxmal, the ancient Mayan city, we were examining a lot of the motifs and patterns and the things that were used to as ornament on Uxmal. And they all were very, let's call them spiritual symbols that had to do with equality and justice and power and a lot of the things that we believe in. But then the more we dug into it, we realized that those same symbols were actually universal symbols because the values were universal, and that you could see them here in multiple cultures. And we began examining 4 different cultures. One was ancient Mayan, one is Adrinkan, which comes from Ghana, and then ancient Chinese, and then ancient Greek culture. And so kind of positioning this as a one from the Americas, one from the African continent, one from the European continent, and then one from the Asian continent, as ways to kind of reframe what we're doing as something that is simultaneously an expression of our values, the values of the project, but also the values of that are, we believe, are universal and shared by many, many cultures.
Mm. And how much of the program were you able to kind of create for this, and how much was created for you for
We
this
had a pretty
project?
large part in it. I mean, I would say that the brief that we were given was quite unique in the sense that it was, we are doing an arts event space inside this larger hotel, but we don't know what it is and we don't know what we want it to be. We just want it to be unique. And we got a chance to work with the client to develop it from a fairly early stage to think about what the programming would be. We were able to be a part of connecting with LACMA and trying to develop this. There's going to be a residency program for emerging artists from downtown LA to be residents here, and there's a studio
Mhm.
portion which is on the rooftop, and then those artist residences will have exhibitions here, and then we'll also be able to be residents in the. So there's, I believe, 7 units that are being set aside for the residency.
Mhm. How exciting to be able to draw all of that together, even the various institutions together in this project.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of intriguing the way you represented it, because you made it so topical by inserting Biden and Kamala Harris into the
Yes.
project. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, our final submission for the DD stage happened to coincide with the election, and we had gone out of our way actually to prior to that, we had gone out of our way to kind of really spend some time searching for entourage to go into the project, where I
Right.
think that's also something that we spent some time thinking about, which is that you know, oftentimes in these projects, you know, there's a tendency for architects to have entourage that is all coming from similar sources, and those
Mhm.
sources tend to all favor, uh, let's say, a mainstream white population. And we had gone out of our way to find a very diverse set of entourage that featured people of color, LGBTQ communities, people that were disabled, and really thinking about that. And then when the election happened, we kind of pivoted on that a little bit further and said, let's actually honor the people that we really want to acknowledge at this moment.
Very exciting. Very exciting indeed. But Alvin, let me ask you also. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm kind of asking you a lot of questions that are trying to draw different things into it. But um, in your early work, I mean, you began at USC, then you went to the AA in London, right?
Correct.
And then for a while you worked at the office of Zaha Hadid.
Correct.
And
Then
what?
future systems.
And then Future Systems, yeah. And there was, and perhaps there still is, this very strong parametric um, approach to design, which is clearly evident in a lot of your other work,
Hmm.
including the work in Thailand,
Hmm.
the mall, right? It's the mall in Thailand.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's a shopping center.
Yeah, yeah. And you see pieces of it also, of course, in this project, the Uxmal project. I mean, not just pieces. I mean, it's an incredibly fluid space, if you will.
Right.
So, I mean, in this kind of um, approach, which is, I'll just kind of put it under three-dimensional form, and then there are these cultural resources, and then there is, I think you didn't call it exactly universal archetypes, but you said they were universal, right? That they
Right.
exist in different
Yeah.
cultures, and
I
then they have
would say
culture
they're universal values.
universal values. Yeah.
Right.
How would talk to me about how all of this kind of works together in the design process for you?
Well, I mean, I think the parametric thing is something that, you know, I've basically spent most of my career working on, in terms of really thinking about how architecture or geometry can be the result of geometric relationships. Um, I think it's something that the let's say kind of geometry is something that I've always been passionate about, and form is something that I've always been passionate about. But I think I'm also quite passionate about the fact that what most people understand as parametricism as kind of excessive form that might seem a bit overdone at times is something that I would like to combat, and really kind of say that, you know, form has value in its ability to express and in its ability to convey, but also in its ability to, you know, possess soul. And I think that's something that oftentimes gets, might be the critique of a lot of the parametric work that is out there, is that it may feel a little bit soulless. And I think that this is one where I think, or in all overall, I would say that's one of the approaches that I like to look at, is that I think a lot of times, you know, the meaning or expression of form is what provides it its soul, and that you can tell when things have meaning and when they don't. And that is something that
they got there already.
Sorry. Yeah. So I think it's a kind of circumstance where I think the kind of ideas about what's going on in this project are things that are evocative of, let's say, also a very cognizant shift by myself in my own work that has come about because of, let's say, partially because of my role at USC, partially maybe a kind of maturity or a maturing in my own self. And without a doubt, a lot of it has to do with the recent turns of events from 2016 till now, of, let's say, shifts in global politics and culture, and something that I like to think about a lot as, let's call it the social cultural context of authorship, where we oftentimes think about context in architecture as something that's highly related to physical location and site and orientation and all of the things that have to do with environment and those things. But I think what we also need to think about in terms of context is thinking about it as I said, like a social cultural context. And that's something that I think, if you look back at all forms of creation, particularly when you look at things like music, movies, books, things that you can actually identify what periods of time they were authored in because of the things that they're talking about and the values that they are trying to express. I believe that that's something that should be in architecture as well.
Representing place and time.
Yes. Right.
And culture.
Yes, and time being a reflection of society.
Yes.
Right. And similarly, we can look back at certain films and identify them as being authored within certain periods of time, and that is why their meanings actually have different sort of, let's say, expressions or values embedded into them.
Let's just go back for a minute to your role as educator, and how does that influence you in the work that you do? I mean, what is it? Does it influence you in the way you share your work or describe your work, or the way students describe themselves and the way they approach it? Is it both ways? How does all of that come into your work?
It absolutely informs the work that I do. I would say that my practice is deeply informed by my teaching, and my teaching is deeply informed by my practice. And in both cases, I would say that in both practice and teaching, I see it as a form of research, which is, I think, important to think of research not necessarily as the discovery of information, which I think often gets misunderstood as what research is, but more the production of knowledge. And that is something that you know, I think where I see the value of design is not in solutions, it's in asking better questions to solve. And so the way I approach my students is similar, where my job is not to help them find better solutions. It's to help them discover better questions to ask and then work on a solution. Because I think oftentimes we get caught up in, let's say, architectural practice when we're dealing with clients and we're dealing with sites and efficiencies and, you know, pro formas and things like that. The questions that, or the solutions to those types of questions are typically not very interesting. But if we can find bigger questions to drive the project, we can figure out those solutions along the way, right? Like you can, like it's easy to add a solution to a project and resolve something. It's harder to add an idea.
Absolutely, yes. What were the sort of questions you asked yourself that brought you to architecture or design? Yeah.
If
Where did that come? Yeah.
If I have to be absolutely honest, the questions I asked myself were, what can I do that's creative that I don't have to study that much? And I was very creative and liked to make things as a child and as a younger student. I think I found the act of creation quite interesting and found that I could dive into a studio culture, and whether it is a good thing or a bad thing is yet to be, is probably a bigger statement. But you know, I found that architecture was a place where the culture of the design school meant that oftentimes you're encouraged to forsake your other classes and you know, concentrate on, you know, I'm not condoning this, I'm just being honest in my answer. But also I think what I really, the questions I got interested in is the fact that I think the best architects are those that are able to draw from many, many, many things and many different disciplines. And it allowed me to engage in a type of study and now in a type of practice and a type of role as an educator, where my ability to design and my ability to deliver is actually predicated on my ability to understand many, many things, right? In terms of having a little bit of idea about politics, about culture, about economics, about engineering, about the humanities, and all of these things are highly critical to great architecture, where I would say great architecture kind of synthesizes all of these things.
You had a long relationship with the museum, Alvin. You've sort of participated in different things. It's more than a decade, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I've been partially in and out involved for about a decade. Well, actually, probably exactly a decade.
Yeah. So let me ask you kind of two questions. Where do you wish the museum would be? I mean, in what direction do you hope the museum goes to? And then, you know, sort of, what was it about the design awards that kind of brought you back again, or brought you connect with us again?
Well, I mean, I think the direction that I would like to see the museum go is that I would like the museum to become the kind of biggest advocate for design culture in mainstream Los Angeles culture, right? And I see that that is the huge opportunity that we have that maybe doesn't exist as much in American culture as it might in other places, which is the kind of visibility and let's say awareness of design as part of mainstream culture, and that it would be the go-to place for people in Los Angeles to try to understand what was going on with design and try to get their fingers on the pulse of the things that are happening and what was of value to their lives, because it was of value to those that are working in the fields that are really thinking about the future of what our societies could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what drew me to the awards is it felt like, to be honest, it felt like if I didn't apply to the A&D Museum Awards, that there's definitely a little bit of FOMO, like fear of missing out. Like,
Oh.
like I will say that, I mean, it felt very local and very much part of my community, and that I should be engaging in that community, because I really, really do value the community of the A+D Museum and people like yourself that I've been able to connect with because of the museum. And I think what yourself and the other members of the board and Anthony have been doing with the museum has just been fantastic, particularly in the context of the current pandemic, where it seems like the pandemic has not slowed the museum down, it's actually accelerated it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's actually breathed new life into the museum because of the new formats that we're looking at, like today in terms of connecting by Zoom, or the A&D Awards event, which was, this kind of virtual space that, by the way, I do owe Anthony an apology, because I was in that virtual space having a conversation with his avatar, with my avatar, and I was in the middle of that conversation, but my son was steering my avatar, and while in the middle of the conversation, my son decided to walk away from Anthony. So
yeah.
So if Anthony is watching, I apologize. I didn't get a chance to say sorry. I really didn't mean to virtually leave him on the spot. But I virtually walked away from him in the middle of a conversation.
I'm sure he's not on, but I'm sure he didn't take that in any other way except that it was a kind of an experimental party, if you will, for many of us. Yeah.